I'm going to show to you that you don't need to know anything about the Arabic language. You don't need to recognize alif, ba, ta, which is the ABC of Arabic. You don't even need to know how Arabic looks like. Okay? You may even think it looks Chinese. Who cares? It's irrelevant. I'm going to try to articulate an argument that you don't need any knowledge of the Arabic language to really understand that the Quran is actually linguistically miraculous. To explain this, for some people who know Arabic, I just want to touch on the smallest chapter of the Quran, and then we'll go into the nitty-gritty on how we can articulate is from the divine without knowing any Arabic. Now, the shortest chapter in the Quran is only 3 lines, and it's called Surah Al-Kawthar, the chapter called the abundance. Now, this chapter has around 10 categories of meaning, 10 chunks of meaning, also known as lexemes or lexemata. It's a linguistic term, you don't have to know it, but there you go. So there's 10 categories or chunks of meaning. And what's very interesting, there are 10 words, so there are 10 chunks of meaning, and there are 10 letters used in each verse, and there are 10 letters used only once in the whole chapter. 10 letters used only once in the whole chapter. So it's kind of unique arrangement here. There are 10 chunks of meaning, okay, 10 categories of meaning, which doesn't mean 10 words, because you can have a word with a preposition. You have 10 chunks of meaning, 10 categories of meaning, and you have 10 letters used in each verse, and 10 letters only used once in the whole chapter. And that's if you consider the letter Hamza as a quasi-letter, as a partial letter. And in the original rasam, if you study the Arabic language, the original compilation of the Arabic tradition, the Hamza was considered an alif, okay? And plus it's not considered as a full letter. So from that perspective, it's quite interesting. But also what I want to talk about is that the Quran, throughout all of its verses, is very unique and eloquent. And I want to give an example, just the first verse of this chapter. Just so you have an understanding that basically what I'm talking about is not just some random stuff, okay? So the Quran starts off by saying, Inna a'tainaka al-kawthar. Indeed, we have given you the abundance. Now from an Arabic perspective, it starts with the emphatic particle, inna. You know what this really means? Some people say it means verily or indeed. But I like to do it in a Greek way. I'm Greek, by the way. Yeah, I look thoroughly Pakistani, but I'm Greek. Now, the Greek way is this. When you go to a Greek wedding, what do you see that happens? You break plates. Because, it's the emphasis. Well done, congratulations, bang, right? So this is what inna really means. It's like unquestionably, without a doubt, bang your hand on the table, break the table. I'm telling you, man, this is sure, right? It has a sense of surety. And not only this, not only does the Quran use the emphatic particle, but it uses the personal pronoun we. So verily, sure, we. Who's we? It's not a group of people, it's the majestic we. Just like the kings in Old English would say, we shall summon him to the courts, to indicate ability and power. It's a perfect choice of personal pronoun. Verily, unquestionably, without a doubt, we have given you, atain. Now what's interesting, this word, this Arabic word, if you compare it to any other word in the classical dictionary, it has 2 added connotations. It means not only have we given you, but the thing we're giving you, we own, and we're doing it with our own hands, which adds to the surety and the emphasis of this word. Because I can give you something, you may not own it, I may not own it. And I may give it to you via proxy. I might say, bro, can you give it to the sister, please? You see? But if I'm giving it with my own hand and I'm owning it, it gives the more emphasis to the fact that, yes, actually you're getting the abundance. And what's interesting, it's in the past tense. We've given you. Not we shall give you. We've given you. Adds to the emphasis of the surety. Not, oh yeah, we're going to give you, which is true, but we've already done it. Khalas, full stop, as the Arabs say. Done deal. And not only this, it mentions the personal pronoun we again. So it's indeed we have given you. It's like a double jab with the right hand, if you like box. I love boxing, right? Bam, bam, boom. Yeah? That's the effect of the language here. It's like, indeed, verily, we have given you, right? You can tell I'm passionate about this, right? This is just for me. It's not my own therapy, guys, yeah? and then the Quran ends in this verse, Al-Kawthar. Al-Kawthar comes from the triliteral stem, ka, tha, ra, which have Arabic words like kathir and aktharu, which means plentiful and many. Now we know this word primarily means, according to the Prophet Muhammad upon him be peace, a river in paradise, the highest status in paradise, a river in paradise. But linguists and even scholars like Ibn Taymiyyah and Imam al-Qurtubi, they basically said you could look at the linguistic meaning. So it's plentiful. But the interesting thing here is there is a specific grammatical nuance. In the word al-Kawthar, there's a letter called wow. You know wow? It looks like a big comma, yeah? Now wow is the wow factor for this word. I'm telling you, wow is the wow factor for this word. Because if you look at the grammar of the grammatical nuance here, when you look at wow in the middle of some words, it means a continuing action, a perpetual action. Just like in the Quran when it says, وَتَوَوْصَوْا بِالْحَقِّ وَتَوَوْصَوْا بِالصَّبْرِ. And continue enjoining the truth and continue to enjoying patience and steadfastness. So this wow indicates a continuing perpetual thing. So instead of saying just kathir, many, it says al-kawthar, which means many continuing. So Allah is giving an abundance to the Prophet Muhammad upon him be peace, continuing abundance forever, eternally. Now this is just the first 3 words of the chapter, just to show the kind of emphasis and eloquence you have in the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So, how on earth can we articulate this to a non-Arab? This is all about Arabic. Maybe I'm lying, right? I'm Greek, looks like Pakistani from Hackney. What does he know, right? And it's true. What do I know? So don't take me for granted. This is for you to research for yourself. You know, we're not fascists in Islam. The only people that could say anything and tell you anything is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and His Messenger. You know, we just say what we think we know is true. Now, there's a few things I want to talk about. The first thing is testimony. Testimony, brothers and sisters, is that we believe the say-so of others on many different things. The newspapers, the media, even at school, the scientists. We don't do all the experimentation ourselves. A necessary part of knowledge is the say-so of others, is testimony. And this is why Benjamin McMillan, an assistant professor on epistemology, which means the study of knowledge, he basically says testimony is concerned with how we acquire knowledge and justified belief from the say-so of others. That's why Professor C.A. Cody, in his book Testimony, which was a landmark book on this issue, he said, many of us have never seen a baby born, nor have many of us examined the circulation of blood. Which is true. We haven't examined the circulation of blood. Who's seen a birth before? Not many of us, right? But yet we believe what happens because we read it in a book. That's not direct experience. That's the say-so of others. Do you know that? That's the say-so of others. And there's been quite an in-depth study concerning testimony. I don't want to get into it and confuse you, but firstly there was a discussion on, is testimony a fundamental source of knowledge? There was a debate between Professor C.A. Cody and David Hume. Not a real debate because they live 100 years apart, but intellectually there was this different narrative going on. For example, Dr. Elizabeth Fricker, she says that we have to rely on experts. I don't have infinite amount of knowledge. I have to rely on some experts at some point in my life. Professor of philosophy Keith Lehrer, he says we have to base it on trust. That you have to be trustworthy in your assessment on the trustworthiness of others to know if you should believe them or not. And Assistant Professor Benjamin McMillan, he talks about the right to referral. That I'm giving you testimonial knowledge now. I'm just talking to you. You have to believe my say-so. But he says there is a right to referral. That you have to challenge me via the Q&A, the question and answer sessions, for me to clarify, to justify what I've said. And you have to take that responsibility, and I have to take that responsibility in answering your questions. And this makes testimony or testimonial knowledge extremely valid. So I just want to make this sound very easy for you, not to confuse you, by giving you a quick question. Who believes China exists? Put your hand up. Woohoo! Who could speak Mandarin? Anyone can speak Mandarin? 你好吗? 我喜欢英国茶. Yeah? I want some English tea, I said. Does everyone believe China exists, right? Right, prove to me China exists. Firstly, who's been there? Okay, you guys can't get involved in this, right? So most of us have never been to China, but prove to me China exists. Let's go, quickly. Okay, the sister's saying there's a Chinese lady next to me. So, I can claim that I'm a Fufulonian and I'm from the planet Fufula. It's just a statement. She could claim that she's from, I don't know, Singapore. There you go. So, do you see the point? You just have to believe her say so. I want empirical evidence China exists. Come on. Sorry? The panda in Edinburgh Zoo. But it's in Edinburgh. You don't have a big mark on like the posterior of the panda saying made in China.
Check your clothes.
Your clothes. Yeah, but that could mean anything. I could say made in Fufula. Doesn't mean my clothes are from Fufula. Come on, I want proof, guys. The world map. Yeah, but that's still testimonial knowledge. You have to believe that someone took a picture or made the map, and you have to believe that there is a place called China and someone drew it, right? That's still testimonial. Even if you look at Google Maps, there's this landmass. You don't have in all the trees together written, this is China, right? You just have to believe. Someone points, oh, that's China, by the way. That's testimonial knowledge. I could point to an island in the Pacific Ocean and call it, this is the island called Guguga, right? I want proof, guys, that China exists. That's not proof, as we said. And from this perspective, we could apply testimony on the Quran. And there are many academic testimonies that show that the Quran is inimitable, it's matchless. For example, you have Professor Martin Zammert from the Netherlands. He says, notwithstanding the literary excellence of some pre-Islamic poems, the Quran is the most eminent written manifestation of the Arabic language. Now you may argue to me, but there are other counter-testimonies from other scholars who say that the Quran is not matchless. For example, you had the famous Noldecker, the famous German scholar who said the Quran is actually rubbish, linguistically. Now there is a problem here. You don't have to believe in the counter-testimonies because we have a majority saying the Quran is matchless. Just because there's a minority saying the Quran is not matchless, it doesn't mean it's true. Also, you have to understand the background information. To believe in this German scholar's statement that the Quran is not matchless, he has to claim he has better linguistic authority than the 7th century masters who couldn't even produce the Quran. He has to have a conspiracy to remake Arabic language and literature. Because for centuries, all of the linguistic masters were dumbfounded and flabbergasted concerning trying to emulate anything like the Quranic discourse. And you have some guy who learned Arabic as his second language, and he didn't know it very well, by the way. That's true, because he got what he accused the Quran of grammatical mistakes were not grammatical mistakes. There were nuances in Arabic balagha, Arabic rhetoric, called iltifat, called referencing, shifting. It's a long, complex issue, but just to show that he wasn't really mastered in the language. So, we don't have to take the counter-testimonies seriously, just like we don't take the counter-testimonies of flat earth creationists. Who believes the world is flat? Nobody, right? But some people actually argue it. It doesn't mean we have to believe them. So, we understood testimony, that the Quran from a testimonial perspective is matchless. So what do we do now? We have 4 possible explanations where the Quran came from this perspective. An Arab, right? Or an Arab, right? 2, a non-Arab. 3, Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam. Or 4, God. These are the 4 competing explanations for the data that we have, the inference. The inference is the Quran is linguistically matchless. That's the inference. We have good grounding to believe in that. These are the 4 possible explanations. I want you to use your mind now. I don't want to preach to the converted, so use your mind. Number 1, could it come from an Arab? Maybe. Well, let's discuss this. Some people are saying yes, some people are saying no. Well, let's discuss this. What's very interesting is the best linguist of the time, Walid ibn al-Mughira, he saw by God. He said, by Allah, this can't come from a human being. I'm the best at poetry and prose. I'm the best linguist. I know all the constructions. This cannot come from a man. I'm telling you. This is why after the initial accusation that it came from Muhammad upon whom be peace, they claimed that it was magic. And you know what's very interesting? And listen to this historical fact. The academic Navid Karmani, in his essay Poetry and Language and the Blackwell Companion to the Quran, listen to what he says. Obviously, the Prophet succeeded in this conflict with the poets. Otherwise, Islam wouldn't have spread like wildfire. Think about it. You have a nation who loves language. They love language, right? And they pride themselves on articulation. The Quran comes to challenge them. A lot of these people convert to Islam. If it was not true that the Quran was linguistically superior and that they could challenge it, why would they convert to something false? So we have good historical evidence to show it couldn't come from an Arab. Now someone may argue, what about today's Arab? Like the Egyptians. May Allah preserve them, right? Now in Arabic, if you want to say, where is the telephone? You would say, Ain al-hatif, right? Where is the phone? But in some parts of the Arab world, especially in Egypt, you're like, Ain al-telephone, right? There's a kind of linguistic degeneration of the Arabic language. Go to some villages in Iraq. Well, how do you say chocolate in colloquial Iraqi? Nestele. Nestele. That's an English word, Arabized. So there's been linguistic degeneration. We don't have the same structures in that linguistic environment to produce amazing articulation. So it can't be a modern Arab. So it can't be from an Arab. Second point, could it be from a non-Arab? Well, obviously not, the Quran is in Arabic. You know? You can't produce the Quran. The Quran is in Arabic. And that's why the Quran says, and indeed we know that what they say, it is only a human being who teaches him. The tongue of the man they refer to is foreign, while this is a speech, Arabiyyun mubin, a pure, clear Arabic. So it's irrational to say that it came from a non-Arab. Finally, could it come from Muhammad, upon whom be peace? Well, maybe he was a genius, right? Well, let's discuss why it couldn't have come from Muhammad, upon whom be peace. Number one, he was an Arab too. Logically speaking, if all the best Arabs failed, he was an Arab, then he couldn't produce anything like the Quran. Number two, after the initial accusation of the Arab linguists that he produced the Quran, they said it couldn't have come from him. It was taught by somebody else, it was magic, it was superior, it was from the spirit world, from the genies, right? Number three, the Quran is a literary masterpiece. This is without a doubt. It's a literary masterpiece. But all literary masterpieces coming from human beings are developed and changed with additions. Shakespeare, he worked on it, right? Homer's Iliad, he worked on his literary piece. But the Quran, as it was revealed, it was unchanged, unedited, but remained a literary masterpiece, which is almost impossible psycholinguistically from a human perspective. Fourth point, look at the emotive psycholinguistic content. The Prophet Muhammad, upon whom be peace, suffered torture, abuse over 23 years. And yet, none of that psychology is in the Quran itself. It remains in the divine voice. If you study psycholinguistics, you know a bit of Shakespeare is in Shakespeare. A bit of Homer is in Homer. You know that their characters are in the text, but the Quran remains in the divine voice. A great argument. The next point, number 5. In all human expressions, if the blueprint exists today, brothers and sisters, if the blueprint exists today, you can copy it. You can match it. Take, for example, famous artwork like Monet or Post-Impressionism or Van Gogh. We have amazing replicas that sell for thousands because they know the blueprint. They know the brushstrokes, the kind of style that it was used in. So if you have a blueprint, you should be able to emulate it. But the Quran is today alive and well with us, 1400 years on. The blueprint is there, but we can't use it to emulate it, which indicates that it can't come from a human being. Now, what's very interesting, that there was a linguistic study, an academic study called Author Discrimination Between the Holy Quran and the Prophet's Statements. So what the scholars did, they compared, and this is in the journal Literary and Linguistic Computing, volume 27, number 4, 2012. Now, basically what they did was they compared the Quran with the prophetic traditions in Sahih al-Bukhari. They compared the Quran with Sahih al-Bukhari, and they used various linguistic techniques to basically analyze the Quran compared to the statements of the Prophet Muhammad, upon whom be peace. And look at some of the results. I'll just give you one piece of data that they found. And listen very carefully. 62% of the prophetic traditions of the hadith words are untraceable in the Quran, and 83% of the Quranic words are untraceable in the Prophet's words. From a linguistics, pragmatic perspective, this is impossible for any human being to achieve. Even if you're a rapper. The words you use in your day-to-day are going to be the words you use in any of your expression, whether it's poetry, prose, singing, rapping, mumbling, or the utterances you have when you have a hangover, yeah? The point is, regardless, you're going to use the same type of words. But 62% of the words in the prophetic traditions in Sahih al-Bukhari are not found in the Quran. And 83% of the words in the Quran are not found in Sahih al-Bukhari, the statements of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Finally, on my last minute, maybe he was a genius. It makes sense so far. It couldn't come from an Arab, couldn't come from a non-Arab, couldn't come from the Prophet Muhammad upon whom be peace. But maybe he was a genius, just like Shakespeare, or for many of you, Sheikh Zubur. Right? No, not funny? I think it's funny. Anyway, the laugh's on me. So Shakespeare, for example, yeah, he was a genius. I love Shakespeare, by the way. Shakespeare was great, but he wasn't unique. If you study Shakespeare, you see that he used a meter of English called the iambic pentameter, trochaic verse, and blank verse. Many other literateurs use this. Christopher Marlowe, right? Fletcher. I mean, even some English scholars, they say that Christopher Marlowe was actually the author of some of Shakespeare's works. He wasn't inimitable. He was great and a genius, but he wasn't inimitable. And he didn't have sustained eloquence. He had to edit and amend his work. But the Quran is sustained eloquence without addition, and it cannot be matched from a structural perspective. And that's amazing. So, God is the best explanation. It couldn't come from an Arab. It couldn't come from a non-Arab. It couldn't come from Muhammad upon whom be peace. Therefore, it came from God. I hope this has encouraged thought about the Quran being unique and special, and for you to be able to articulate its linguistic miracle, even if you don't know Arabic, using testimony, inference, saying couldn't come from an Arab, couldn't come from a non-Arab, couldn't come from Muhammad upon whom be peace. Therefore, it must have come from Allah. But don't forget the main message of the Quran, brothers and sisters, which is very simple. Don't be a slave to yourself. Don't be a slave to society. Don't be a slave to anything else, but be at service to the one that created you, and the one that knows you better than you know yourself, and the one that loves you more than your mother does. Great chilling with you. Assalamu alaikum.